Another concert in a hospital ward for more British soldiers, this time for wounded from the front line near Kohima, brought down to Dimapur for treatment. Vera Lynn saw two severely wounded men and, wanting to do whatever she could to ease their suffering, she walked over to their beds. She took one in her arms and sang to them both, delivering their own personal concert with the force's sweetheart. Nearing total exhaustion after almost 2 months in Burma, Lynn would return to England soon after this concert, but she didn't want to leave without completing her mission to raise morale with songs that would comfort and energize the men of General William Slim's forgotten army, who were fighting one of the most brutal campaigns of World War II. In her 2017 autobiography, Lynn explained that she went to Burma to get as close as I could to the actual fighting. For me, this meant going to meet the troops in person. It meant doing everything I could possibly do to support them and let them know that back in England we were all thinking about them and willing them on. Born on March 20th, 1917 in London's East End, Lynn's singing talents were apparent early on. At 7, she was singing in working men's clubs. By 11, she wanted to be a professional singer. She left school at 14, performing with big-name bands like Billy Cotton, Charlie Kuntz, Joe Lawson, Ambrose, the Glenn Millers of Britain in the pre-war era. In 1939, she recorded her first signature song, We'll Meet Again, an instant hit for the wives and girlfriends of men overseas. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Lynn followed with Good Night Children Everywhere, which resonated with the families whose children were sent to the countryside to escape the Blitz. When the Lights of London Shine Again was a longing for the Blitz and its nightly blackouts to end. Her second signature song was 1941's White Cliffs of Dover, imagining the homecoming of British airmen who had been braving those angry skies to take the war to the enemy. Before Hitler could begin his planned invasion of England, Operation Célion, he had to dispose of the one thing standing in his way, the Royal Air Force. Through the summer and autumn of 1940, the skies of southern England were filled with Spitfire and Hurricane fighters beating back the Luftwaffe. The losses persuaded the Führer to bomb England into submission instead. London was the main target, bombed continuously for more than 3 months. Londoners held firm into 1941, and Hitler realized that the British people were not so soft. By that summer, his attention had turned to the Eastern Front and the invasion of Russia. The RAF had supported the country through its darkest hours, but the people had proved they could withstand Germany's worst. They realized that to give in meant being overrun by Germany and the end of life as they knew it. Fortunately, support networks had started to appear, and Lynn was the epicenter. In April 1940, the BEF voted her top vocalist, ahead of Judy Garland and Bing Crosby. Soon the force's sweetheart was a daily presence on BBC radio, the lifeline between those at home and their loved ones overseas. In 1941, Lynn began her weekly request program, Sincerely Yours, aimed at overseas troops. Most evenings, Lynn was also performing in London. Her popular Applesauce review with Max Miller was interrupted when the Holborn Empire was bombed, so they moved it to the London Palladium. Impromptu concerts at munitions, factories and hospitals, anywhere. She found people, filled her days. She could have kept on this way, and since she had married in August 1941, she had every reason to remain settled in a role that kept her out of harm's way. But Lynn wanted to do more and joined the Entertainment National Services Association, ENSA, which sent performers to battle zones. Given the risks, there was a shortage of top entertainers, and the droll British Tommies rebranded ENSA as Every Night Something Awful. Vera met with ENSA co-founder Basil Dean for advice on where to go. Given that troops in Italy and the Middle East were already well supplied with entertainers, she wanted a destination where she could do the most good and which was in the greatest need of a morale-boosting performer. Without hesitation, the answer was Burma. It was a word often whispered in Britain, for in the mind of the populace, serving in Burma was a death sentence with extreme heat and disease and a foe that paid little heed to the Geneva Convention. Japan had announced its ambitions for Southeast Asia, and the Pacific at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. In the following months, the Imperial Army left a trail of gratuitous slaughter as it took over strategic locations. In January 1942, the Imperial Guards Division massacred 150 British and Indian troops who had surrendered at Parit Sulong in Malaya. Some were beheaded, the rest were bound with wire, machine-gunned, set on fire and run over by trucks. After the fall of Singapore, Japan planned to kill 50,000 Singaporean Chinese and other anti-Japanese elements. Estimates put them halfway to their goal within a month. In early 1942, Japan wanted Burma and its seaport capital of Rangoon as a starting point for the overland supply line to its old adversary China. Like India to its west, Burma was part of the British Empire and had a small defense force, as most British troops were occupied in North Africa and the Middle East. To secure its position, Japan set up a puppet regime and established an alliance with neighboring Thailand. In the next few months, the Burma Corps were forced northwest to the Indian border, eventually establishing a strong position in the coastal area of Arakan. A newly formed Chindit force under Brigadier Ord Wingate launched daring raids into the interior to cut Japanese supply lines. In 1943, Lord Louis Mountbatten took over as the supreme commander of the war in Southeast Asia, with a newly promoted Lieutenant General William Slim in charge of the 14th Army, which was to become the driving force in the Burma campaign. Slim trained all of his men in jungle warfare, noting the enemy would treat clerks, cooks, drivers, and medics the same as combat troops. Slim's strategy was to consolidate his forces near the border, fighting defensively to weaken the enemy. When the 14th Army had developed the necessary skills and knowledge of the terrain, they would push forward and liberate the whole of Burma. In March 1944, Japan sent its troops across the border at Imphal in an attempt to take India, and the 14th Army was engaged in ferocious, face-to-face battles along the Kohima Ridge. It was into this inferno that Britain's Songbird planned to fly. On March 23, 1944, a short Sunderland flying boat left England's south coast for Gibraltar, the first of 9 stops over 2 weeks, carving a wide arc across the Atlantic to avoid German-occupied France. She had no makeup artist, choreographer, or film crew. Her wardrobe was limited to her favorite pink dress and her Ensa uniform. After a day's break, Lynn and her regular pianist Len Edwards flew to Tripoli, Libya, then to Cairo, where Lynn performed for 3,500 Royal Artillery troops fresh from combat in southern Italy. A sandstorm forced them to hold 3 separate indoor concerts. On March 29th, Lynn and Edwards took off for Iraq, but were forced to land in the Dead Sea. They flew out of Basra 2 days later, but had to turn back due to bad weather. Lynn held an impromptu sing-along at a supply base. Then it was on to Karachi via the island of Bahrain. Then Bombay, followed by Nagpur in central India, where they boarded a U.S. Lockheed Hudson light bomber to Calcutta. It was April 7th, Good Friday, and Lynn found time for 2 concerts there before losing her voice. The sandstorm in Egypt had damaged her throat. To make matters worse, Edwards was hospitalized after an asthma attack, and the first concert was canceled. Though unable to sing, Lynn visited men who had been fighting in Burma and transferred to the Calcutta hospitals. She later recalled, "I toured every ward and sat on every bed and chatted with everyone I met.